Once Upon a Crime, Chapter 9. The leaden sky belched thunder as Gretel hurried toward her rendezvous. At last the sultry weather broke, and long overdue rain fell heavily upon the dusty streets of Gesternstadt. By the time she reached the ford, the water levels were high enough to give a timid traveller pause. But Gretel was not, had never been, and would never be, timid. She positioned herself between a sweet chestnut tree, which provided some modicum of shelter. The town clock could be heard striking 10. Where was Roland? For one dreadful moment she contemplated the thought that he might fail her. If he did not show up as promised, then things were looking very bad for Gretel, and for Hans, whom she had abandoned to give muddled excuses for her absence. It was becoming increasingly urgent she bring home not only Frau Habsburg's cats, but proof that both she and Hans were blameless in the matter of any of the recent murders, both in Gesternstadt and Bad am See. Rainwater fought its way through the broad leaves of the tree and assaulted Gretel's straw hat, quickly reducing it to a floppy mess. She considered removing it, but at that moment she heard hooves clattering along the stony lane. Reluctant to give herself away in the event that someone other than Roland was charging down the road, she flattened herself against the tree as best she could, peering out through the relentless weather. Seconds later, a bright chestnut horse pulling a racing gig tore around the corner and came to a slithering halt at the ford. Roland struggled to restrain the restless animal. Gretel crept out from her hiding place, appalled at what she saw. "My apologies for being late, Fraulein," said Roland. "I had a little difficulty getting the gig hitched." "Are you completely mad?" asked Gretel. "A wagon," I said. "Some sort of sensible conveyance." This was all I could find at such short notice. "A racing gig? And look at that animal. Is it even broken in?" The young stallion, for such it was, foamed at the mouth, shaking its head in fury at the bit between its teeth. He pawed the ground relentlessly. "Better climb aboard, Fraulein. He doesn't like standing still." The gig was equipped with sufficient seating for driver and a slender, lightweight passenger. Gretel hauled herself into the alarmingly flimsy contraption and forced her ample posterior into the inadequate space. The horse, spooked by Gretel's clumsy struggles, attempted to turn in its traces for a better look at what was going on behind it. Roland was forced to urge the beast forward to avoid it getting entangled. With a yah and a flick of the reins, they were away, powering through the fast-flowing ford and galloping out of Gesternstadt. Gretel clasped her suitcase and provisions to her bosom with one arm, the other instinctively hanging on to Roland. To begin with, she was reassured by the fact that she was so tightly wedged into her seat she could not be dislodged. After half an hour, however, a worrying numbness overtook her lower extremities. Her hat had long since blown off her head and into a field of goats who were no doubt now feasting upon it. Mud splashed up from beneath the frame of the gig, and with every stride the horse took, so that her skirts were coated with the stuff. Conversation was impossible, so as was snacking. All she could do was cling on, close her mind to images of crashing, and focus on the tasks ahead. At least at this speed, she reasoned, none of the Kingsmen would stand a chance of catching up. They should reach Bad am See in daylight and be able to ascend the mountain to the Troll's home before it became too dark to do so. The horse seemed not to be made of mortal flesh and blood, but galloped on despite its irregularly heavy cargo, as if borne on some magical line of tireless steeds. Gretel made a mental note to check for the stump of a horn when she finally stopped. She had never met a unicorn, but she had heard how swift and powerful they were. Roland was proving to be an equally doughty travelling companion. As the hours and the miles sped by, he offered neither complaint nor question, but steered the gig adroitly round potholes, puddles, and startled sheep. By the time they traversed the pass above Bad am See and began to descend, the rain had eased. Gretel had the curious feeling that speeding through the storm had left her washed but filthy. Her tweed cape and cotton skirts were waterlogged and cold against her, the weight of rainwater pressing her blouse and undergarments onto her tingling skin. A layer of mud coated her boots and legs. Her hair was loose and flat against her head, hanging as a sodden veil down her back. She had hoped to slip unnoticed through the spa town, but it was hard to see that she could do so in such a state, clinging as she was to a young man, their outlandish conveyance being whisked along by a supernaturally fast and wild horse. She yelled at Roland, "Pull over, there, down that track." He did as instructed, reining in the horse. At last it seemed fatigued and came to a halt without protest, even standing still while Gretel pried herself out of her seat and hobbled stiffly about in an effort to restore circulation to her feet. Roland also climbed down from the gig, stretching his limbs and patting the horse's neck, muttering soothing words in its foam-flecked ear. "I feel completely revolting," Gretel said, squeezing water from her hair. "How are we supposed to pass unnoticed through Bardamsay like this? Look at us." "Is it necessary?" "What?" "That we pass unnoticed." Roland continued to stroke the horse, but he was watching Gretel closely now. "You have told me next to nothing about the purpose of your journey, Fraulein. I had assumed we would find an inn." "Ah, yes, take your point." She hesitated, unsure of to what extent she could risk taking the young man into her confidence. "It's like this, Roland. I am on client's business, and as such I have to observe a certain measure of confidentiality. Keep a low profile, that sort of thing." He looked unconvinced. "There are people I need to approach, and it is better I do so without warning them I'm coming," she tried. Still Roland remained impassive, but clearly waiting for a less vague explanation. And just stop there a minute, I think. "There are those who would like to prevent me in my inquiries. One cannot follow the profession of private detective without making a few enemies along the way." She waited for some sign that he was satisfied with her picture of the way things were, but none came. With a sigh, she decided there was nothing else for it but to be honest. She needed the boys' full cooperation. "The facts are these. I am under suspicion for 2 different murders in 2 different towns. I am completely innocent, I assure you, but I need to find proof to clear my name. And that of my brother, in fact. I am also dangerously short of money, a detail of my circumstances that I know will be of interest to you. To get paid by my one client, my only client, I need to retrieve 3 missing cats. The troll, on that mountain over there, knows who took them. I need to get through Bardamsay and up to his hovel so that I can extract the name of the abductor out of him, go to wherever it is he lives, and get the cats. I cannot return home without the cats, or the evidence that will exonerate me from the crimes of which I have been wrongly accused. Is all that clear enough for you?" Tired and bruised as Gretel was, her wits were still sharp enough to notice a minute shift in Roland's demeanour. She could not be certain, but she believed the change began when she mentioned the word cats, and increased with the addition of troll. She watched him closely. He did not answer immediately, but seemed to be considering the information that she'd just given him, weighing it up in some way. It was a full minute before he spoke. "I have agreed to help you, Fraulein, and I will be as good as my word. But my advice to you is to forget about the cats. Do not question the troll. By all means seek to clear your name of the accusations against you. This matter cannot be left, I see that. But as to the cats," he shook his head solemnly, "best forget them." "Now, why would you suggest I do that?" Gretel asked. If I do not return to Gesternstadt with the cats, my client will not pay me. Can you so easily give up the opportunity to earn money for your family in what must be for them troubled times?" Roland fidgeted, but said nothing. "You are a brave, steadfast young man, I can see that. Surely you're not afraid of the troll?" "The troll? No, I'm not afraid of that loathsome creature." "You've seen it?" "Yes." "You've been to its house?" "No, I saw it but once, in Gesternstadt." "Whatever was it doing there?" "That I cannot say." "Cannot or will not?" There was another roomy pause, loaded to the gunwales with important things left unsaid. Gretel sighed. She didn't have time to spend trying to pry revelations out of a stubborn young man who clearly did not want to tell her anything he didn't have to. "Look," she said, "I know there must be reasons behind your reluctance to continue with me on my mission, but if you refuse to share them with me, there's little I can do to allay your fears. I must see the troll, and I must act upon the information he gives me. Will you at least take me up the mountain to his hovel? After that, well, we shall see what we shall see." Roland thought for a moment before nodding curtly. "Very well," he said. "If you will not be persuaded otherwise, I will take you to the troll." "Excellent. Now, it's getting late. The light is already fading. There's nothing else for it but to drive through Bardamsay as swiftly as possible. With luck, no one will think to question our unconventional appearance before we've left the town and disappeared into the hills." Gretel decided that she must brave the troll alone. The nature of his interest in her suggested he would not welcome another male travelling companion. Better that she use whatever advantage she might have to gain all the information possible regarding the stealer of the cats. Roland would deliver her as high up the mountain as was practicable, secrete himself in a glade somewhere, and await her return. It wasn't until she was within smelling distance of the troll's front door that she felt her resolve begin to waver. A clear picture of the awfulness of the creature came back to her, along with a memory of how strong he had looked and how swiftly he had moved. Not to mention how suddenly his temper had got the better of him. She hesitated upon the threshold, hand raised as if to knock, seriously doubting the wisdom of what she was about to do. Suddenly the door was wrenched open, and the troll stood before her, his bulk filling the portal. The moment for turning tail and fleeing had passed. The only course remaining was to press on with what had once seemed like a perfectly watertight plan, but was now beginning to spring rather too many leaks for Gretel's liking. "Ah, Herr Troll, good evening to you," she said, in a tone that sounded as insincere even to her. The troll leaned forward from the flickering gloom of his dank dwelling into the failing light of the spring day. As recognition registered in the swampy depths of his mind, his features contorted themselves into what Gretel surmised was a smile of delight. "Big fat woman," he declared. "Quite so," said Gretel. She held aloft a small package. "Big fat woman bearing gift," she explained, startled to hear her own voice describing herself thus. The troll made as if to snatch the parcel from her, but she was anticipating such a move and ducked beneath its arm, holding her breath, stepping into his home, chattering brightly all the while. "Now then, Herr Troll, no need for such haste. I have travelled a great distance and endured considerable personal risk and discomfort to be here. The least I would expect from such an excellent host as yourself is that you offer me a seat." She smiled expectantly. The troll looked at first surprised and then embarrassed. He shuffled about the fetid space, dusting off one of the wooden stools by the fire, gesturing at her to sit upon it. Gretel did so, finding herself grateful for the smoky warmth of the fire. The heat of the day had departed with the sun, so that her wet clothes now felt horribly chill against her flesh. She moved a little closer to the flames. Steam began to rise from her skirts. She expected the troll to sit opposite her, but instead he busied himself gathering bowls and spoons and ladled something pungent and lumpy from the pot above the fire. He handed a bowl to Gretel, nodding emphatically. "Big fat woman like," he told her. "Big fat woman eat." Gretel took a steadying breath and reminded herself that a stomach trained on boarding school meals could hold on to anything it offered. Even so, it took an immense effort of will to force down the rancid chunks of meat and grey gravy in which they swam. She refused to consider what creature might have given its life to form this revolting concoction. The troll was watching her with a gaze of unnerving intensity. Gretel swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Delicious," she declared. "Indeed, it could only be improved by a sip of that superlative grog I recall from my previous visit. Might you have a drop or two to spare?" The troll's highly mobile face underwent a range of expressions that registered first pleasure, then memory, next suspicion, followed by confusion, coming to rest in the shape of cautious agreement. He fetched a stone jar, removed the cork with his teeth, and passed it to Gretel. "So kind," she said, relieved to be washing down the foul food with something that might at least render inert the more serious diseases that must have been bubbling away within the stew for several days. She handed the drink back to the troll, who took only a modest swig before sitting heavily on the stool in front of her. He did not eat, but continued to watch her as she battled through her seamlessly bottomless bowl of supper. A piece of gristle lodged itself between her front teeth, but as she felt it unlikely her host's possessions included a box of toothpicks, there was little she could do about it. She decided it was best to get to the reason for her visit without further preamble. "As I mentioned, I do indeed have a gift for you, Herr Troll, a splendid specimen to add to your collection. I am certain you will be more than pleased with the quality of the item I have procured for you." She paused, partly to allow for a grunt or nod of some other sign of the troll's approval, and partly to chew a particularly fibrous morsel of meat. The troll, clearly not versed in the matter of polite conversation, offered nothing by way of encouragement. The meat also refused to yield. Gretel held out her hand for the brew and took another gulp. Gasping, she went on, "And I shall happily pass this trophy over to you the second you furnish me with the information I require." The troll shifted on his stool, his rheumy eyes narrowing. "If you recall, Herr Troll, I require the name and address of who it was that stole the cats, or, as seems to be the case, had the cats stolen on his behalf. Give me that name and that address, and I shall give you the splendid, freshly picked, first-class finger." She quelled a shudder at the memory of the lifeless digits, and was fleetingly thankful for the lack of light in the hovel, which prevented her from seeing what she was eating. She feared it would too closely resemble the grey, wrinkled nastiness that had been the defining characteristic of the fingers when last she'd forced herself to check them. The troll scowled, hesitated, and then slowly uttered the awful words, "Giant want cats." Gretel stopped chewing. "Giant?" "Giant," the troll nodded. "Giant always been wanting cats. People been getting cats for Giant. He pay lots of treasure. Troll take cats to Giant. Sometimes Troll been getting cats." He smiled at the memory, his tusks exposed to their very gums. "Giant give Troll lots of fingers." He laughed, his customary phlegm-filled chortle. Gretel attempted with some difficulty to remain focused. "And does this giant have a name?" she asked. The troll shrugged. "Giant," he said. "Giant," Gretel repeated. She put down her bowl. "And this giant lives where, precisely?" 30 leagues. 30 leagues? Could be 40. Troll not sure. That way." He waved a lumpen arm. "Follow road to east for 1 day, 1 night. Climb big hill with snow. Giant has cave at top and castle inside cave." "A castle inside a cave? That doesn't sound likely." The troll shrugged again. He took what was probably his first ever stab at elaboration. "Is castle. Is inside cave," he said. Gretel heard some small, distant voice in her head telling her to be careful what she wished for. She had wanted the identity of the catnapper, and now she had it. She had needed to know his whereabouts, and the troll had supplied that detail also. Somehow, though, being in possession of these facts brought her no joy. She was prevented from further contemplation of what might lie ahead by the troll springing to his feet, bi-digit hand outstretched. "Big fat woman give troll finger now," he said. "Oh yes, of course." Gretel stood up and handed over the parcel. The troll tore off the wrapping and then tenderly, almost lovingly caressed the cold blue finger, sniffed it, nuzzled it, gazed at it adoringly. The troll took down his special box and gently placed his new acquisition inside, taking one more lingering look before snapping shut the lid and replacing the box on the mantel. "Well," said Gretel cheerily, "I believe that concludes our business. I will take up no more of your time, Herr Troll, but bid you good night." She started toward the door, but the troll placed himself very solidly in front of her. "Big fat woman, stay," he purred, his voice soft and husky, his piggy little eyes half closing as he let his gaze wander over Gretel's body. "I'd love to, of course," said Gretel, "but alas, this is a business trip, and that business demands my urgent attention. Sadly, I must decline your generous offer." "Big fat woman, stay," the troll insisted slowly. "Stay with Troll all night." Gretel's tongue suddenly felt dry as parchment, and beads of desperate perspiration formed on her brow. She kept her voice as level as she could, and as firm as she could, but a mouse-like squeak had attached itself to the end of each word. "I'm sorry, no." The troll frowned. "Big fat woman not want to stay. I assure you that is not the case. Big fat woman not like Troll. As I said, it is urgent business that calls me away, nothing more." She paused before playing her trump card. "Naturally, I would hate you to think me ungrateful or rude by refusing your hospitality further. There is perhaps some way I can convince you of my gratitude, something I can give you." The troll's face lit up. He took a step forward and placed a heavy hand on Gretel's arm. She held her nerve, giving a little laugh that she prayed did not sound flirtatious. Moving minutely so as to dislodge the unwanted weight of the troll's paw, she said brightly, "Knowing how much you prize your collection, I took it upon myself to bring a second specimen, just as a thank you for your cooperation and gentlemanly behaviour." "More finger?" "Yes, one more finger." And here comes the doll. Yes, right. Come on then. Right, stay there. How about that? Let's see if he stays. Oh no, he's off. Let's go. Bye. Where were we? "Yes, one more finger." "Give, Troll," he demanded in a tone that suggested he was not altogether convinced. "I do not have it on me. I left it in a safe place." "Where is?" "A little way back, along the trail. We can go there now together, you and me, and I will give you the finger. How would that be?" The troll said nothing for a long minute, but scratched his fistulous chin, his eyes raised to the roof of the hovel as if searching for answers among the moss and algae that flourished there. At last he nodded curtly. "Big fat woman, take Troll to place," he said. It was properly dark now. A sky grubby with clouds left over from the earlier storm allowed only fragmented moonlight to light the path. The troll appeared not to need any form of illumination to find his way, and lumbered on ahead, while Gretel struggled to keep up, frequently stumbling and slithering on the uneven, wet track. She directed him to the place where she had indeed, earlier in the evening, hidden the second tightly wrapped finger. The troll dug beneath the muddy stones. For a horrible moment, Gretel worried that some scavenging animal might have discovered the body part and enjoyed a free supper. After an agonizingly long time, the troll let out a grunt of glee. He pulled off the wax paper and held the finger up, testing it with his teeth as if assuring himself of the quality of a gold coin. Gretel silently congratulated herself for the brilliance of her plan. She knew it would pay to keep a finger up her sleeve. She also knew timing was crucial. She had already begun to back away, remembering all too well how quickly the troll could cover the ground. Relying on the fact that he would be too engrossed with his new prize to notice her slipping into the night, she had chosen this spot because she had already selected an excellent hiding place, not a minute's scramble off the path. She could never outrun the creature, but if she could make it to her cover and stay there until the troll tired of searching for her, all would be well. She was fairly certain he would be eager to return his precious finger to the safety of his collection, and that eagerness would, heaven willing, override any transient interest he might have in Gretel herself. With a small but significant distance now opened up between herself and the revolting creature, she risked turning and quickening her pace. The silence behind her suggested the troll was still lost in a loving reverie with his cherished object. Gretel's left foot found a patch of thick mud and shot forward, lengthening her stride unnaturally and painfully. She gasped, but forced herself not to cry out. In a flash, everything changed. With a roar, the troll lurched after her and flung himself forward. He crashed to the ground at her heel, one hand clasped firmly around her right ankle. Gretel screamed. The troll roared. He roared again, springing to his feet, still holding tightly onto her. Gretel found her leg raised high in the air in a position that was as undignified as it was uncomfortable. "Let go!" she yelled. "Let me go!" The troll paid no attention to her entreaties, but proceeded to drag her back along the trail in the direction of his home.